Passivhaus cheaper than conventional. Okay, now you think I probably lost my mind, but as Roman yesterday already said, there are projects out there that are cheaper than Passivhaus. But how could that actually be if Passivhaus costs $500 a square meter to actually build, and at the end we're spending less per square meter than a conventional build? Um, it is the $500 are there. It's the air tightness, it's the quality of windows, it's the heat recover ventilation unit, it's the design processes, the blow door testing, the commissioning of your ventilation system, your PHPP, your certification. All that obviously comes as a cost to actually achieve Passivhaus. But how is it actually possible that Passivhaus buildings are actually sometimes cheaper than conventional? And it's actually not even sometimes. In Europe, we see that the big projects are far more economical than conventional big projects. So when we look to these big EU projects where people are competing on price, and if you know regulations, then you know that building projects only win if they're the cheapest, and nobody is getting it if it costs more. And still, a lot of Passivhaus projects are winning these big European projects. And the reason is really simple. Yes, Passivhaus costs more because we're delivering a better building. However, because the communication between the builder and the designer is strongly improved thanks to the Passivhaus standard that forces you for a better communication. Thanks to this, a trained team that has been doing it for a while is able to get cheaper than conventional buildings. Theoretically, you could apply the same thing to any building. It doesn't need to be a Passivhaus. It is a planning process that is better in a Passivhaus. So let me explain that. By my calculation, it was 400 in 2022. Now I went up to 500 just to be on the safe side with Passivhaus. $500 additional costs. 1/3 is in design, 2/3 is in actual construction. What does this actually mean? We're spending $150 to $200 in the design phase to actually improving our design and making everything work far smoother in the construction phase. And because of this improvement in our design phase, we're able to drop our costs by, sometimes 10% or even more. So let me give you a few projects of that. So there is one project in the US that I want to give you. The build was 165 US dollars per square foot. If you want to know that in square meters, you add a zero, $1,650 per square meter. That's roughly correct. That's what the Passivhaus costed. The local average is between $175 and $200 per square foot. So you see, the 165 is far lower, around 10 to 50% cheaper than the building built in that area. Then let's go to Ireland, as Roman is from Ireland and said he heard already of projects in Ireland that are more cost effective than conventional builds. That's true. Here, one example of a 290 square meter home that saved $20,000 less than the standard house. So 20,000 doesn't sound now too much, 20,000 euros. However, this is now, he calculated it as a Passivhaus and he looked at it as a conventional house, and the calculation came out that it is $20,000 cheaper. Most likely it has something to do that they could get rid of a radiation system. So all the plumbing is gone and the radiators are gone, and the heating system could be smaller by putting a little bit more insulation in. So I think this is where the savings came from. I don't know the whole background of where this $20,000 savings came from. So he calculated it conventionally, he calculated it as a Passivhaus, and it was actually cheaper on paper. So that is not what I described earlier. It's not the better communication. Another one that is really close to my heart is a project in Nepal. It's a straw bale Passivhaus that was 50% cheaper than conventional builds. And the reason why it's close to my heart is Passivhaus helps people in third world countries to survive in extreme weather events. And if we're able to produce this 50% cheaper than conventional build, then we're actually able to really make a difference. Because let's be honest, there is far more people living in far less quality standard of living than we are having right here. And for us, it's more like a quality of living. However, in other places, it could actually be a question of survival. Yeah, and Nepal was able to bring the costs down by 50% to conventional builds. The reason is Passivhaus is not forcing you to use a particular building method or building material. It tells you how it has to perform. And because labor is cheap in Nepal and you can get really cheap building material that maybe takes a little bit longer than normal building methods in the first world or in the developed world, there we probably want to have really low labor costs because they're really high, like labor time. And that's the reason we're spending more money on quality materials that are faster to assemble. And here we are able to save 50%. And I know of people in Ireland, a builder, he's normally 10% cheaper than conventional builds, and an architect in Germany that is designing apartment blocks for 10% below conventional builds. So yes, soon you're in the Passivhaus world and you're really living it and you're going for certification and you're following the steps. Your buildings are getting more cost effective, not just because of savings via green loan or construction cost savings, but as well because of the improvement of the communication between design and execution. And that's where the biggest savings are. However, what's happening in Australia? Yes, in Australia, we already achieved as well buildings that are not necessarily cheaper, but they're coming to the same price than a passive house, than a conventional house. And here we're having the Woodside building at the Monash University. And this one is a passive house that was able to achieve the same costs than conventional builds. Yes, passive house is economical. And as well, what I want to point out for our architects that are looking for winning awards in 2022, of the 14 category, of the 6 of the 14 categories in sustainability in architecture were actually passive houses. And I think only 24 so passive houses were submitted of that 200 something submissions. So if you want to win awards as well, passive house is your key. I hope this helps you again with understanding passive house a little bit better. And if you have questions, please reach out, or if you have comments, and I may come back to them. Thank you. Bye-bye.